In 1978, nearly 1,000 people were killed on the orders of a narcissistic cult leader. But why did this actually happen? Do we really know everything that went down on that day? And what can we learn from those lucky enough to escape the Jonestown Massacre? Congressman Leo Ryan arrived at Jamestown to investigate disturbing reports he had received about the settlement and its inhabitants, the People's Temple. At first, Ryan and his entourage of media and concerned family members were shown the better side of the compound. Ryan was so taken in by all this that he publicly declared,
"Whatever the comments are, there are some people here who believe that this is the best thing that ever happened to them in their whole life."
According to former U.S. Representative Jackie Speer, who was one of Ryan's aides at the time, someone then slipped a note to one of the reporters on the tour. It read in part, "Please help us get out of Jonestown." As information spread that Ryan might be able to get people out of Jonestown, more unhappy residents quietly approached the congressman's group. The next morning, Ryan confronted Jim Jones, a leader of the People's Temple. He insisted that he be allowed to leave with any unhappy defectors who wanted to return to the United States. Jones didn't react well to this, and the mood became tense. Speer later told ABC News, "It was a powder keg of emotions. I mean, it was so clear to me that this thing was about to erupt, and we needed to get those who wanted to leave out of there as fast as possible." Between the night of November 17th and the morning of November 18th, around 40 of Jonestown's 950 residents asked to leave with Leo Ryan. This was more than Ryan had expected, and the congressman had to bring a second plane to the compound's airstrip in order to accommodate them all. When it became clear that some residents really did plan on leaving Jonestown, utter chaos broke out. Jones himself became visibly unhinged. Fights broke out as families debated on what to do, with husbands and wives arguing over whether to leave or stay. When parents disagreed on the best course of action, they fought over who would get to keep the children. All of this happened very quickly, with life-changing decisions happening in a matter of minutes.
People play games, friend. They lie. What can I do about lies?
Then, just as Ryan was about to leave with the defectors, a man attacked him with a knife. Speer later recalled, "Out walks Congressman Ryan in a bloodied shirt. Basically, someone had tried to put a knife to his neck, but it wasn't successful." Leo Ryan's group escorted the defectors to the airstrip where their planes were waiting, piling into trucks to get there. But not everyone among them had good intentions. While almost all of the group who fled with Ryan really did want to get out, Jim Jones had secretly instructed Larry Layton, one of his most loyal men, to go to the planes under the pretense of escape. Unknown to those on the trucks, more of Jones's men were following them in a tractor trailer. The group arrived at the airstrip and started hurrying onto the planes. Then they heard a barrage of gunfire. Jackie Speer later told ABC News, "I saw everyone scurrying, and then I saw Congressman Ryan get shot, and I'm running under the plane as well, and he's down, and I'm getting down. And just thinking to myself, oh my God, this is it. I'm going to die." 5 people died on the airstrip that day. Ryan, newspaper photographer Greg Robinson, NBC cameraman Bob Brown, NBC reporter Don Harris, and Patricia Parks, one of the defectors who had been fleeing for their lives. Others were gravely injured. The assassins fled back into the jungle, leaving the bodies and wounded on the airstrip. Jonestown was equipped with loudspeakers, which Jim Jones often used to give long, rambling sermons to his captive audience. After Leo Ryan's group left the compound, there was an announcement over the loudspeaker that everyone should gather in the central pavilion. This was unexpected, and it was clear to all that something had gone very wrong. One survivor, Tim Carter, remembers the eerie quiet in Jonestown as virtually everyone followed the order. At the time, the pavilion was surrounded by armed guards. This wasn't completely unprecedented. Jones had often called Jonestown residents to gather for his so-called white nights, in which they might be subjected to anything from all-night diatribes by Jones to preparations for an attack by the military.
They're out there! They're out there! They can hear us! They know we mean it! We'll kill them if they come!
Hyacinth Thrash had been a member of the People's Temple for decades and moved from Indiana to California to Guyana at Jones's instruction. Her loyalty to the cult stemmed from her belief that Jones had used his miraculous powers to cure her breast cancer. This time, though, she refused to follow his orders, instead staying in her room and hiding under her bed. Her sister Zippy, another longtime and loyal member, left for the pavilion. Thrash later said she was unconscious during the massacre, although she wasn't sure if she passed out or simply fell asleep. When she woke up, everyone was dead, including her own sister. At the end of the day, Jim Jones would be dead along with almost all of his followers in Guyana. But based on one order he gave, it's possible that he might not have intended to die. Jones apparently had a contingency plan in place to flee to the Soviet Union, and he tried to put it in motion right before the massacre began. Tim Carter survived the massacre because after arriving at the pavilion, he was asked to go on an errand for Jones. Carter was to take money to the Soviet embassy in Georgetown, Guyana's capital. Jones knew that Leo Ryan had been killed on his orders and that the US government would come looking for him as a result. The cult's leader was hoping that once word got back to the US about Ryan's death, he would be able to flee to the USSR. Carter was essentially being sent to bribe them with no idea what was about to happen. He later told ABC News, "I can honestly say that never once in my mind did it occur we're all going to die, because 24 hours after that dinner and show, literally 24 hours later, everybody was dead." Once everyone was gathered in the pavilion, Jim Jones took to the stage and began to speak. Thanks to tape recordings of the event, commonly known as the death tape and now in possession of the FBI, we know what Jones said at the meeting. He informed them of the murders he had orchestrated on the airstrip and tried to convince his followers to end it all.
If we can't live in peace, then let's die in peace.
When Jones told his followers this, some stood up to argue with him. It was clear that not everyone was prepared to die. Longtime follower Christine Miller, a black woman from Los Angeles, can be heard on the tape confronting Jones, saying, "As long as there is life, there's hope. That's my faith." But Jones would not be deterred. He ordered some of his followers to mix cyanide with Flavor Aid and then bring forward what he called the vat with the green sea. Yes, it seems like it's more common knowledge today, but the idiom "drink the Kool-Aid" comes from this event. But the drink mix used was the knockoff Flavor Aid instead. He then gave instructions dictating the order in which different age groups would be killed as his armed guards loomed over the congregation. Remember earlier how we said that Tim Carter was on his way to the Soviet embassy? Well, he didn't manage to get far into the jungle before the massacre began. Hearing screams, he turned back to Jonestown, where he found his wife and son dying. He told ABC, "I was shocked with everything. I was shocked. I was completely overwhelmed with the death that was around me." While the events at Jonestown were once considered a mass suicide, the truth isn't so simple. Hundreds of the victims either fought to survive or had no say in what happened. When the vats of Flavor Aid and cyanide were brought out, some people cheered and drank willingly, but many, including children, had to have the poison forced into them. Others were shot or stabbed. Willing or not, more than 900 people died that day. Tim Carter later told ABC News, "The reality is that it was not some giant, let's get together and die for Jim Jones moment. It was exactly the opposite. That was my experience. What happened in Jonestown was murder." Jackie Spear agrees with Carter. In one documentary, she explained, "I hate the references that somehow they did this voluntarily, that there was suicide. It wasn't. They were murdered." The cult's leader decided not to put himself through the painful death he had forced on his followers. Instead, Jim Jones died of a gunshot wound to the head. Former People's Temple member Laura Johnston Cole told ABC News, "Obviously, he didn't have the guts to drink the poison that he made everybody else drink, so he was shot, which I think is just a chicken's way out." A handful of people survived the Jonestown Massacre. 2 or 3 were at the compound but did not go to the pavilion, and Tim Carter had been sent on his errand. Others managed to escape into the jungle, either earlier in the day after the ambush on Leo Ryan's group or later once it became clear a massacre was taking place. Tracy Parks was only 12 years old when she accompanied Ryan to the airstrip with her family, who had decided to defect. After Ryan and 4 others were slaughtered, including Parks' mother, her father screamed at her and her sister to hide in the jungle.
God gave me wings because I flew down that airstrip. I don't think I touched the ground.
It took the girls 3 days to find help, but they made it out in the end. Meanwhile, Leslie Wagner Wilson and a few others ran into the jungle before the massacre and walked 30 miles to safety. Wilson later told ABC News, "I was so scared. We exchanged phone numbers in case we died. I was prepared to die. I never thought I would see my 21st birthday." She emerged from the jungle to learn that several of her family members had died at Jonestown. The People's Temple also maintained an outpost at a house in Guyana's capital, Georgetown, a plane ride away from the compound in the jungle. There were several people staying in this house on the day of the massacre, who were there for various reasons, including a few who had been playing in a basketball tournament. Information came through about the massacre that was happening. Some didn't take the messages seriously, including 2 of Jim Jones's own sons, but one woman followed Jones's orders as if she had been on site. Jones's secretary, Sharon Amos, subsequently killed her 3 children and then herself. As news of the massacre broke out, people began showing up at the house. For the 1-year anniversary of the massacre, one of the survivors in Georgetown spoke to the New York Times using a pseudonym. They recalled, "A lot of our people were standing outside in the cold in their bathrobes, like they were being searched. The radio was cut off to Jonestown. We weren't told what was happening for hours. Eventually, the survivors were told what had happened to their fellow cult members. For those who survived the massacre at the airstrip, a horrific day turned into a long and terrifying night. Because Jonestown was so isolated, it was 22 hours before help managed to reach them, so it was down to those who had been lightly wounded to keep the seriously wounded alive. Jackie Spear was one of the survivors in the worst shape that day. She had been shot 5 times. As she later told ABC News, "My whole leg is blown up. There's a bone coming out of my right arm. There was no reason why I survived except it wasn't my time." The seriously injured were moved to a tent, while other survivors spent the night in a small shop. All night, they expected the gunmen to return to finish the job. Everyone in the airstrip besides the first 5 casualties survived, along with a few at the Jonestown compound, those who escaped through the jungle, and most of the People's Temple members in Georgetown. Those who did survive, however, would grapple with the memory of the massacre for the rest of their lives.